It's one night, but I don't know if we'll be back on Tuesday.
Same plan.
Is that all? I tried that at Goldberg. I haven't gone back to it. I tried it a couple of times. Really cool. Why? What's next 2 days? No.
What you do 2 days? You 2 days later.
I could do it Wednesday.
Why? What's on Wednesday? Oh yes. Okay, so do like last time. Right. Okay. I don't know if it'll work out. Sometimes these things. Holiday. It should be a chassan unless I lose my voice or something. Okay. Actually, quite challenging more.
We finished with the hard one.
I know. We've got a few challenging tomorrows, actually, must say. Let's see how much we can do. We're up to Samach Beis and Beis. By Gemara, there's actually a dot, even though it's only about 6-7 lines from the end of the thin lines. The topic is as follows. The number of places the Torah says 2, which is not necessary because of the fact that the minimum of plural is always 2. So from there we learn that 2 that they should be similar. And at the same time, the Torah also says that you don't need them to be similar. So the question is, what's it necessary for? We're up to Samach Beis Samud Beis Hihochi, 7 lines from the end of the thin lines of Samach Beis Samud Beis. Now the Gemara is going to examine the Korban Tomid that is brought every day. Hihochi. Gavitzvidim Nami the Korban Tomid is one name. Kvosim, the Torah says, we say every day that you should bring Kvosim. That's Korban Tomid. By the way, you should be aware that the mitzvah to say the Korban Tomid every day in Korbanos is very, very, very important. You have to stand for it. Somebody once told me that he spoke somewhere. It's interesting. He spoke in I won't say where, but he said he spoke to in a community where people didn't say Korbanos. Well, most of them did. He said to them, just say Korban Tomid. Somebody said to him, it was the first time he had said it in years. And he said, one thing he realized is sometimes you tell people to say the whole Korbanos, it's very daunting. Who can time to say everything, especially some sit to him and have like 40, 50 pages. So what happens is, if you say the Korban Tomid, and that's actually in Halacha is the only one, which one is absolutely obligated to say is the Korban Tomid. And in that pasuk it says, Kvosim b'nei shana, sheep 1 year, within 1 year, it's mimim shnaim 2. Now if I'd have just said sheep, in the English, sheep is not a very good word, but in the Lashon Kodesh, kvosim, sheep, so what would you have said? 2. So why is it supposed to say shnaim? Between the name kvosim yud, kvosim shnaim. Matam the shnaim shushdem sham have to be the same. Umenayin shaf v'yishen shnaim sham kishen tam leva kevas kevas sugo. It says a sheep a few times. Has anybody ever found anywhere in Shas that there's a mitzvah for the 2 sheep of the Korban Tomid to be the same? It says, well, you're right. It's not true. They do not need to be the same. Corresponding to the day. I just said to it outside, and then Ben actually uploaded it for those who still have their phones with them, but hopefully most of them already put away in the box. Next to the Mizbeach, there were 24 rings, which they would put the animal's neck inside to hold it still while they would shecht it. They would always do the ring, which was opposite the sun. Now, in the morning, which ring is opposite the sun? This is the tricky thing. Notice, I know. Because the sun rises in the east, in the west, and it shines in the east. Rashi, the Rambam, and Tosfos are all bothered that the Gemara always talks about using the second ring, not the first ring. If you look very carefully, in the second ring here, I've also got a picture. It's the second ring, not the first ring. The question is, why not the first ring? Rashi suggests, why not the first ring? Does anybody know Rashi? Rashi says because you need to use the first ring to keep the legs in place, so the sheep shouldn't try and roll over, and then maybe become a treifa. Tosfos says we don't want to use the first ring because we don't want it to relieve itself next to the Mizbeach. Rambam says it's more connected than the sun. I just want to say one point. If you ever get a chance to learn Yecheskel, in those days, serving the sun was the most common avodah zarah that there was. If you think about it, the thing that we benefit the most directly from is the sun. We would have no light, no heat, nothing would grow. Victor Miller often would speak about the beauty of the sun. I mean, the sun is the most amazing thing that we have. So everybody would serve the sun. What we did in the Beis Hamikdash, I mean, there's a terrible thing in Yechezkel. I don't know if I'm the possible in Yechezkel. What they would do is they would serve the sun while they would defecate towards the Beis Hamikdash to show that they would bow down to the sun, which was always in the east, gets up in the east. Their backs would be towards the west, towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and they would defecate towards the Beis Hamikdash and to show that the main chavotzim was to serve the sun. When we do the Korban Tamid, we do the exact opposite. We take the sheep, the sun is shining, and we shecht it for Beis Hamikdash. So that was like connected the sun. So now we're going to say the word Shnaim over here has nothing to do with Shnaim Layom, has nothing to do with two equal, identical, but rather connected the sun. Let's do it inside. We're up to 2 lines from the end of the thin lines on Samach Beis Beis. Shnaim Layom, Kneged Hayom, Atem Kneged Hayom. You might have said that it doesn't mean 2 connected the sun, but that's how many you have to bring. It says 1 sheep in the morning, 1 sheep in the afternoon. The Torah already told it us. You go for the northwest, right? If you go for the northwest, because that is the furthest where the sun can shine in. Rashi explains that if you work out, the sun always rises in the no, it doesn't work. It doesn't. It rises in the northeast, because in the summer Rashi is talking about. So it goes up from it goes up from the northeast. That's how it does it in the summer. That's if you look at Rashi go along, Rashi explains how it works through. Okay, it's going to show the joke. So it's always on the second ring. But the Musaf on Shabbos, where it says Shnaim, says 2, and there it's not referring to the day. The sheep on Shabbos have to be equal. Okay. Now we move on to a new topic, which is called Shechita Bachutz. There's a terrible avera called shechting a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash, for which a person's chayav koros, which is in the Parsha of Achremus. Now, a person's only chayav koros if he shechts an animal which should have been bought as a korban. So, for example, if they take the soil of Hashem and you shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash, what are you chayav, Moshe? What would be chayav koros? It's a korban which goes to Hashem. There are certain animals which is not so clear should you be chayav koros for or not. Anybody give an example? And the dover, well, the dover goes as a korban. So you've got a few categories. For example, what happens if you promise to give a sheep not as a korban for bedek habayis, but for bedek habayis? Bedek habayis was for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, or a sheep for the sake of for the soil azozel or for the poa aduma. These kinds of animals were not really bought as a korban. So is one a chayav for shchitas chutz. We're now going the sugya of shchutei chutz. It's a huge topic, shchutei chutz. Most of it comes up in Zvachim, but here we have a daf, just over a daf, on the halachas of shchutei chutz. Shchutei chutz means what? What's the is of shchutei chutz? Well, let's write this, not in the fridge, I don't have any space left, at least on our walls. Let's get it very clear. What is the is of shchutei chutz? Somebody said to me in a very one sentence, what's the is of shchutei chutz? Very good. Shechting an animal outside the Beis Hamikdash, which should have been a korban inside the Beis Hamikdash. So the way you phrase it, for example, perhaps a soil azozel you shouldn't get koros for, because it's hard to define the soil azozel as a korban that should be shechted inside. What about the poa aduma? It's also outside. What about? But okay, this is the discussion we're going to have. Now over here it gets even more complicated, because you have 2 goats, he-goats. One is La Hashem, one is La Azozel. You don't know yet until the lottery which is which. And you, a person, not you, Hashem, won't do dreaming to a person would go and check the 2 he goes outside the Beis Hamikdash. Is he chayav kos? That is the question which we're going to be dealing with. Before you do the lottery on them, chayav kos on both. Why on both? Because each one has the potential to be bought as a korban. Once you do the lottery, chayav on the one which goes to the Beis Hamikdash, or potar shel azozel, be potar for the one who gets thrown off the cliff. So the one now explains. What could it be useful? On Yom Kippur, there was actually another he-goat. We spoke about this a couple of times, but it was already about a month ago. There were two completely sets of korbanos brought on Yom Kippur in the Beis Hamikdash. One is in Parshas Achremus, and one is in Parshas Pinchas. Two completely sets of korbanos. Just like, for example, on Sukkot, there's Musfeh of Sukkot. On Rosh Hashanah is the Musafin of Rosh Hashanah. On Yom Kippur, there was a normal korban musaf, On Yom Kippur, you had a normal korban musaf. But besides the korban musaf, there were special korbanos, namely 3, which were unique to Yom Kippur. One which got thrown off the cliff, and the he-goat which got sprinkled also inside. When you've got the two he-goats standing in front of you before you've done the lottery, and you a person shechts one of them outside the Mikdash, what happens? It's high for both. Because let's say, for example, they decide suddenly not to use them for that, but to use them for the musaf, he could. So each one, as Ben put it, what's the halacha of shchutei chutz? A korban which could be brought into the Beis Hamikdash as a korban, and you shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Now these were designated as a korban for Hashem. But you never designated which korban it's going to be. You only designated once you've done the lottery, and you haven't yet done the lottery. So at this present stage, it's something which is suitable as a korban, and therefore, a person's chayav korban. Says the Gemara, why did Rav Chisda say that it's royu for the soil of the Musaf? Why did he say it's royu for the soil which is going to be the sprinkled inside? You still need to make a lottery. That means you can't give me kolos because I could have shechted this as a real korban as a soil Hashem. Why? Because it's not yet fit to be bought as a soil Hashem. Why is it not yet fit to be bought as a soil Hashem? Because I've done Nagbola. Since I've done Nagbola, it's not fit. And the rule is, the Geder is, what's a good word for the Geder? The parameter, what? The criteria. The criteria is it has to be something fit as a korban. This is not fit as a korban, this needs a lottery. So how can you call it as a korban? Says the Gemara, you can't shecht it outside as a normal soil musafin. Why can't you shecht it as a soil from musafin? Why not? Sure, why can't you shecht it as a soil from musafin? Why not? Shalom. Why can't you shecht it as a soil from musafin? Again, you can't shecht it as a soil Hashem. What?
It's not meant for that.
Oh, it's not meant for that, but you could always redesignate it. The answer is because he's not up to there yet. He's not yet done the lottery. If he's not done the lottery, he's not even anywhere near. He's got a couple of hours till he's going to get round to do the sun. As if you remember, it's big day Zov, the big day Love, and the big day Zov, the big day Love, and the big day Zov. This person is not up to the lottery yet, which means it's only starting the big day Love. The Musaf is only bought to big day Zov after you finish big day Love. So you can't say the criteria we said is something which is royal. Again, that's the question inside again. You can't say that it's ready, it's fitting for the Naisa Bifnim because it's missing a lottery. There's so Naisa B'chutz for the Sov, the Musaf, and Nami Lechozit, Mechesri Avodas Hayoim. Because Sov Avchista Ein B'chutz Zman Leboi Bayoim. There's a fundamental difference between having to wait a couple of hours to having to do something to it to be fitting. It's very, very clear because Mamish the Sodas of Shchutei Chutz. We're just discussing the halachas of shchutei chutz. What's the halacha of shchutei chutz? Anything, the criteria is like this, anything which could be bought as a korban, and I chas v'sholom shechted outside the windows, I get costs. But it has to be fitting to be shechted as a korban. The soya nasa Hashem is not fitting because the halacha is, it cannot be a soya Hashem unless you do the lottery. So there's an action required to it. For example, you have to do something to this soy. This soy, as it is now, can never be bought as a soy Hashem. The soy for the musaf, it can't be bought. Why? Oh, he's not up to there yet. He's not yet done the lottery, so he's got a few hours still. That's just a time issue. A time issue is not a problem within the korban. So let's say, for example, let me ask you a question, which more we'll discuss. Not here in the morning's wachi, but let's just talk about it. Imagine you've got an animal which you makdish as a korban, and it's got a blemish which is going to go away. For example, it's got a split lip, which is a problem. You can't split lip. Anybody know about a korban which had a split lip? You couldn't be it as a korban? That's about comes very good. He bought it. So now it's got a split lip. In 2 hours' time, the vet tells me there'll be no split lip. It's going to get better. A vet, somebody's experienced. I take this korban and I shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash. What would you say? Get kolos or not?
Yes. No, it's not
I would say no.
Yes.
I would say no. I'll agree. We'll have to agree to disagree. Because it's not just time. At this stage, as it is, it's missing. So what? We'll agree to disagree. I just want to bring it up as a shaila to get the question. No, because Ben's arguing the Surah Nasa the lachutz for the Musaf. You also can't bring it now, and you still chayv kos. Why chayv kos? Again, if you shecht a soil, which should have been for a soil for the Musaf, but there's no way you can be good for the Musaf. Why? Because the Kohen hasn't yet done the Hagrola, he hasn't yet done the Keteris, he hasn't done any of that avodas. Right here as well, potentially can be used as Kohen to our time. So I agree with you. I agree with you. So, but this is not a Kohen. This is not a Kohen. Right, I will have to get to screen. But that is the Yisroel we're going to be discussing at greater and greater depth for this stage. So therefore, if a person shecht a soil and one of the Sirim outside Beis Mikdash, if it is done, if it is done, I'm just going to get if you chayv kos because it could be soil for the Musaf. You're not chayv kos because it could be a soil for Hashem because it needs a lottery. Oh, the soil Musaf and you need time. Time is not issues. Let's see. The Gemara gives another example. Well, now up to 3 lines at the bottom. If you haven't done a lottery, you can't be chayv because it's lacking an act. The halach is every morning they would open the doors of the Eichel. And if a person shechted it before the doors of the Eichel were open, let's say you're in a very big zvizus, you want to get the job done early. The kernel was a special time. How far could you hear the doors of the Eichel opening? The Gemara says in Yericha you could hear it. Can you imagine such a thing? 10 parses, 40 kilometers, you could hear the doors of the Eichel opening. But you're impatient. So what do you do? You shecht your shlomim before the doors are open. The shlomim is possible. Why? Because it's not open. The same halacha would apply in the midbar if they haven't yet built the mishkan and somebody shechts a korban. What's the halacha? Korban is possible. Why? The doors are not open. There's no doors. Nothing's open. It's not standing. So now what happens if I take that shlomim and I shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash when the doors are not open? What would you say? Again, I took a shlomim and I shechted it before the doors were open, but not in the Beis Hamikdash, outside the Beis Hamikdash. Would you be kos or not? The problem is it's missing something. So that's the Gemara side. So the Gemara says, when it's closed, top of Sabach Gimel Amud Aleph, Shochtem b'chutz, Kodesh Niftachu Das Eichel Potter, my time mechusa persicha mechusa ma'aser dami. At the end of the day, the door's not open. And the door not opening, let me say like this, there's a difference between when the whole problem is waiting to when something needs to happen for it to be a kosher korban. Here, something needs to happen to be a kosher korban.
That answers the question.
Of the boom, that's what I would assume. Therefore, again, so if a person shechts a shlomim outside the Beis Hamikdash before the doors are open, would he get kos? No, because the doors aren't open, so it's not royal to be a shlomim, and the criteria is anything that should have been brought as a korban Hashem, and you bring it as an outside the Beis Hamikdash, you have kos. Now the Gemara goes into halachas of Pesach, which is shechted outside the Beis Hamikdash. We actually had this many times in Pesach, not easy to remember. If a person shechts a korban Pesach on a Pesach, it's a wonderful mitzvah, shecht a korban Pesach. What happens if he shechts a korban Pesach the rest of the year as a korban Pesach? Anybody know what halacha is? It's possible, because there's no way to bring a korban Pesach outside Pesach. If you bring it the day before Pesach, Pesach is done. If you could, what can you bring it as? A shalomim. It's a special pasuk. There's an Hashem doing with baka. The more says you can't bring cattle. The more dashens baka is referring to all animals. That in theory you can bring a Pesach as a shlom. So this gets really complicated. What happens if you take a korban Pesach the rest of the year and you shecht it as a korban Pesach outside the Beis Hamikdash? Would you be chayav kos or not? As is, you couldn't shecht it in the Beis Hamikdash because it's possible. But if you change it to a shlomim, you could shecht Beis Hamikdash. But did you shecht as a shlomim? This is, now we're going to have many shittas about this halacha. But it's very good to get the principles clear. Once you get the principles clear, it's very, very straightforward. The principles are, you shecht to go on Pesach on Pesach, for Pesach, you've done a wonderful mitzvah. You shecht to go on Pesach the rest of the year as a Pesach, you've done nothing as a apostle column. You shecht it as a shlomim, then you've done a good thing. Now we're going to discuss what happens if you shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara. Does he hold of this concept of hurl that you've got the option to bring it to something else? You shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash, the rest of the year, if you shecht it as gone Pesach potter. Now, this, as you face it, is very, very understandable. Why? Let's get it very slowly, clearly. If you shech the Korban Pesach outside the Beis Hamikdash, the rest of the year, as a Korban Pesach, you're not chayav kos. Why? Because as you're shechting it, you're shechting it as a Korban Pesach. And the Korban Pesach at this year, let's say today, I take a sheep, Makdish is Korban Pesach, I shecht it now outside the Beis Hamikdash. Am I chayav kos? No. Because I can't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash because it's not Korban Pesach. But if I shecht it as a shlomim, then I'm chayav kos. Says the Motamad, the Shloi Lishmoy. Hostoma, let's say I don't think anything, Lishmoy who will potter. We say it's Korban Pesach as potter. V'amai, leima hu v'voyu Shloi Lishmoy b'fnim. If I shech the Korban Pesach outside the Beis Hamikdash and I don't think anything, I should be chayav kos because I could have shech as a shlomim. Just like Rav Chisda said, if I shech the two higos before the lottery, and I shech them with intention to do what? As I shech them without any thinking. Then the loch is chayav kos because I could have made it into the soil of the musaf. So why am I not chayav over here? Because I could have made it into a shlomim. I should be chayav. So if I shech the kol without thinking anything else, I should be chayav. Says the Gemara. This is a very simple chiluk. When a person shechs a he-goat outside the Beis Hamikdash, what's a he-goat? What was it designated originally as a chatos? All of them are chatos. What's the musaf chatos? Also a chatos. So it's a matter of being one chatos to another chatos. Here by the Korban Pesach, if I shecht the Korban Pesach without thinking anything outside the Beis Hamikdash, so the only way for it to have been fitting inside the Beis Hamikdash is how? To change it to shlomim. But I never did change it to a shlomim. So if I'm not chayav kos, thereby he goes, it is a chatos, God chose to change it from a chatos to a chatos, fine, that's the same thing. But here, the only way to be chayav is to make it into a shlomim, and never actually made it to a shlomim. Now the Gemara just says, sorry, that you're chayav kos because it could be the soil of a musaf. And one is by the Korban Pesach that you're potter because it's the end of the day, it's not a shlomim. Those two statements were said by Rav Chisda. Says the Gemara, one on Moira heard both of these statements from Rabbi, not Rav Chisda. And after he heard both these statements from Rabbi, he asked the same question and he gave the same answer. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Bar Shimi Masler Ruba de Rabbi. He heard both statements in the name of Rabbi. The Kashle de Rabbi, he asked the same question to Rabbi, why by the soul which is done inside, we say it's a Sam Musafin, or by Korban Pesach we don't. And he answered the same answer. He also have Yoma Pesach shechted bachutz. Pesach shechted outside Beis Hamikdash b'shayim Shana bein Shlomi potter. You always potter. Why does it say you always potter? Let's go very slowly. If you take a Korban Pesach and you shecht it outside Beis Hamikdash, you're always potter. So if you shecht the Shem Korban Pesach, why are you potter? It's anyway going to be potter. I hope this is clear. If it's not clear, it's a chaval. If I take a Korban Pesach now and I shecht it today outside the Beis Hamikdash, could you give me cause for shecht that? No, why not? Because not void because the criteria is you should have bought the Beis Hamikdash. This I shouldn't have bought the Beis Hamikdash. It's not void to be a Pesach. The big chiddush he adds is that even if you shecht it for shlomim, you also not. And that's very strange. You're right, I'm not done a very good thing, but that to be chayav kavos. No, not chayav kasada. To be chayav kavos, it has to be that I should have bought the Beis Hamikdash. You can't say to me I should have bought the Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't ready to be bought the Beis Hamikdash. There's no style of Pesach. It's not even chayav kasada. The question is, but he added another statement. He added, if I take this Korban Pesach, imagine this is the Korban Pesach, I shecht it with the intention that it should be a shlomim. I'm also not chayav kos, and that's a very difficult statement. Why? Because if I would go to the Beis Hamikdash, if the Beis Hamikdash was standing today, I'm doing this Pesach as a shlomim, what would you do with the Korban? You'd say, thank you very much, it's a good shlomim. So therefore, this is something which is voyud to come into the Beis Hamikdash. So why, if I shecht a Pesach l'shem shlomim, would you not give me kos? Anyone want to suggest an answer? No, let's talk about. Okay, let's see the Gemara inside. I said it in front of Yom. He said exactly what we just said now. It's not fitting to go to Beis Hamikdash. You could use it inside the Beis Hamikdash as a shlomim. Meaning like this. If I take the Korban Pesach to the Beis Hamikdash and I change it into shlomim, that's fair enough. That is a real change. But here I'm changing the Korban Pesach into a shlomim outside the Beis Hamikdash. Changing Korban Pesach into Shlomim outside the Beis Hamikdash. That's nothing. That is not considered uprooting. Meaning, how can you change the Korban Pesach in the Beis Hamikdash instead of a Pesach Shechita is not a good Shechita because it's a Shechita. Since it doesn't become a Shlomim, therefore it's not got the din of it's not Chayav. He says the other way. We had now 3 opinions. That's the only 3 opinions we're going to have. Let's get these 3 opinions very, very clear. A person takes a Korban Pesach and he shechts it outside the Beis Hamikdash. We have 3 opinions. One man says whatever he's thinking, counts. One man says whatever he's thinking, no costs. And one man says it depends. If it's Pesach, not Chayav costs, Shlomim is Chayav costs. There are 2 opinions which should be very clear to you. The one which says that you're Chayav costs if you make it into a Shlomim. Why? Because you could have bought to Beis Hamikdash. But Pesach, you're not Chayav costs. Why? Because today it's not worth Pesach. The one that says you're always potter, why are you always potter? We just explained it a minute ago. Because Akira bachutz lav shmei Akira, as you said. Akira bachutz lav shmei Akira. But now we've got a 3rd opinion that you're always chayav koros. Imagine if I was to take a Korban Pesach today. Sometimes you have like these, unfortunately, you need and that want to do something right. Imagine you go to a kehillah and they say to you, we didn't bring a Korban Pesach. We're going to take a sheep. We're going to be makdish l'shem Korban Pesach, and we're going to shecht it today l'shem Korban Pesach. What would you say to opinions? Well, actually, God, in this particular case, 2 opinions. Either chayav or potter, because we're shechting l'shem Pesach. Why you chayav doesn't make any sense. But even if you do it l'shem Pesach, why should you be chayav koros? The criteria is to bring it to Beis Hamikdash. But here it's not going to be brought to Beis Hamikdash as a Korban Pesach. If the Beis Hamikdash was standing now, would you bring this as a Korban Pesach? Of course not. It's not Erev Pesach today. But now, here we're going to have a new topic which is going to come in again and again. It's good to be clear. There's a concept called Mechusa Zman. Mechusa Zman is a Korban brought at the wrong time. There are 2 which are 3 different ways of Mechusa Zman. One is Mechusa Zman when the owner is not ready to bring it. Can anybody give me an example where the owner is bringing it too quick? It gets more exact, more precise. Yeah, but more precise. A zob before the end of his 7 days. That's one example. You led this before the end of the 40 days. That's right. No, that's the birds. That's the common. Mechusas man with the owner is mechusas man is not yet ready. You have another mechusas man with the animal is not ready. When is the animal not ready? It's too young. It's not 8 days old. It's not 8 days old. There's actually one other kind of mechusas man by an animal. If anybody guessed it, they deserve 2 lechayos because I didn't think of it. What? No, because that's not mechusas man in the cup. If there's halach, you're not allowed to shecht oisavis b'noi not allowed to shecht the mother and the child on the same day. So if I've got a sheep where the mother was shechted today, and I want to bring this sheep as a korban, that sheep is mechusas man. It's not ready. Basically, mechusas man is one of 2 categories. Mechusas man, the animal's not ready, the owner is not ready. Now, let's say I take a sheep which is only 5 days old, and I shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Would you give me kos? Moshe, what would you give me kos? Why not? You say it properly. The criteria is to bring it to Beis Hamikdash. This is a 5-day-old sheep. You're never going to bring it to Beis Hamikdash. So would you be chayav kos? No. Oh. So let's get this very clear. What's now? Mechusas man, bein begufa, whether the sheep, the animal. Oh, that's not mechusas man. That's possible. Well, let's go with the more discuss. But now mechusas man, bein begufa, the animal itself, bein bebalim bonus. There is a mechusas man bebalim. Hazov ledas from mitzvah shkivu chatosu v'asham b'chutz. Now, in all these cases, b'chutz, when you brought it outside the Beis Hamikdash, what would you say? A zov, not yet finished his 7 days. He brings his korban and shechts it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Give him kos or not? Oh, Peturim, very good. Mechawin to the advice. Now here gets a bit more complicated. Let's say a Mitzvah brings his oila before the right time outside the Beis Hamikdash is chayav. Why is he chayav? Oh, it's too early. The answer is because let's say I'm a Mitzvah. I got savas, so I have to be a chatos oila and a shlom, right? A chatos osham and the oila. That's actually chatos oila and osham. So I bring the oila outside the Beis Hamikdash before the right time. So you should say to me, I'm not chayav kos. Why am I not chayav kos? Because I'm not ready to bring it. But I'm not ready to bring the oila of the Mitzvah. I could bring an oila as a gift to Beis Hamikdash. Mitzvah without bringing a gift to Beis Hamikdash and send it to somebody else. So a chatos at the osham, since they're time sensitive, meaning you can't bring it before. You can't bring a chatos as a gift. You can only bring a chatos when you're supposed to. You can't bring a chatos. You can't bring a chatos every day as a gift. There was a special study called Baba and Butter. They used to bring a chatos every day, and they used to get very upset with him, etc. He was worried about maybe he did that the day before. But generally speaking, a person doesn't bring a chatos every day. You can't bring a chatos every day. So the oila you can every day. So the oila, I would be chayav kos. Let's say somebody says to you, I'm a mitzvah and I bought the kabbalas outside the Beis Hamikdash on the wrong day. What would you say to him? Oh, very good. If he bought a chatas and osham, what would he be chayav? Potter. He'd be potter. Why? He's not ready. So b'chos his man. If he brings his oila, he's chayav. But the same shaman b'chos chayav. If he brings the kob shaloi lishmoy, is chayav. Why? Let's say he brings the osham shaloi lishmoy. So now it's good as an oila. Is chayav. Lishmoy mia potter. But if it's lishmoy, is potter. Amai name a hoy shaloi lishmoy b'fnim. Let us say that it should be royu shaloi lishmoy b'fnim. That it would be that therefore it should be chayav. I mean, the Gemara is asking. Go back very, very briefly. A Korban Pesach which you bought outside the Beis Hamikdash on the wrong day of the year, we had Robin in the name of Rabbi Yomi that said that you chayav kos. The Gemara brought a very lengthy Mishnah to say that you shouldn't be chayav kos. Why? Because the way the Korban is as it is cannot be brought to the Beis Hamikdash. So if I bring a Korban Pesach today, why should I be chayav? What are you going to say to me that I could have bought as a shlomim? If that's the case, say the same thing by the mitzvah. You could have bought the osham as an oila. Meaning like this. The halacha is that Pesach during the rest of the year is actually meant to be a shlomim. For example, let's say I designate a sheep which is only 10 months old as a Pesach. Is that good? Yes, it has to be less than a year old. Comes out of Pesach, I never bought it. For whatever reason, I found another sheep, a better sheep, etc. What should I do? Can I wait for it for next year? Why not? Be out to date. Women out to date to be more than a year old. So what should I do with it? Reject the rest of the year. Outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Now that's that it should be a Korban Pesach. You're chayav kos. Why you chayav kos? Since it should really be a shlomim, and the shlomim can be bought the rest of the year, so therefore chayav kos. It's very, very important. It's very geschmack. We have 3 different opinions regarding some Jewish acts of Korban Pesach outside the Beis Hamikdash during the rest of the year. One man says that you always potter. Why you always potter? Because if it's for Korban Pesach, you can't read the Beis Hamikdash anyway. If it's for shlomim, akira b'chutz lav shmei akira. There's one man that says you always chayav. If it's for shlomim, of course you chayav because you could have bought the Beis Hamikdash. Even if you bring it as a Pesach, you chayav because really a Pesach during the rest of the year. What should it be? A shlomim, and a shlomim could be bought to Beis Hamikdash, so you always chayav. And we have a third man that will differentiate. It depends. If it's a Pesach, then you're potter. If it's a shlomim, you chayav. That means like this: if you do double jeopardy, you come again. If you bring a Korban Pesach the rest of the year outside of Beis Hamikdash, you're potter. Because since it's not really a Korban Pesach now, so if you're potter, but if you bring it as a shlomim, then you're chayav. Okay, that's the 3 opinions. Says the Gemara, you have to uproot it. Akira chutz lav shmei akira. Upliged achilke ba'tovi. Ogs achilke ba'tovi that says that akira b'chutz is word. So go machlikas, and the Gemara brings 2 amiroim that held of the previous shittas. Omama, v'shigid alein chava sheshem u'poto shel ha'azoza. That means like this: if a person makes a lottery, the Kanada makes the lottery in Yom Kippur, one he guilty designates for what? For Hashem. One out, and I shecht it outside the Beis Hamikdash. Would you give me kos? Why not? Very good. Why not? Why not? Because it's not meant as a korban. What is it meant for? Throwing off the cliff. Very good. So if you're not chayav kos, even though it's been in the Beis Hamikdash for hours and it's got a lot of kedusha.
In that one,
no, nothing at all. Nothing. Not chayav anything. Now the Gemara brings a Beis that discusses these halachas. Ish basis so that she ishchat shoy or kesef or is b'machne. Shecht it in the camp, meaning out of Beis Hamikdash. Or that she ishchat b'chutz b'machne, even out of the camp of Christ. But Pesach ol moed le'reviyah. He did not bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. This is the place where we see the criteria is very well designated. Well, Pesach ol moed, there's something that you shouldn't have brought to Pesach ol moed is not included. But Pesach ol moed le'reviyah, lahakiv korban Hashem, to bring it as a korban Hashem. And the one now Dalshans leaves to korban. Since the pasuk is korban, shemini if you catch with the kabayshniku korban, kinin shnek imam of Yaakov is korban Hashem. After the Melchemes Midian, the army officers saw that there were 12,000 soldiers, and how many Yidden were killed when they fought Midian? 0. Not a single Yid was killed. How many Goyim did they kill approximately? 3 million. Think about it. They went in a battle, not with a machine gun, with a sword. a sword, as you hit somebody, you're about to hit back. And they were 12,000 men killed 3 million people, and not one of them got harmed. So they want to bring a korban. What was the korban they brought? Anybody know what they bring? Gold. They brought. It says the words vernacular is korban Hashem. You see the word korban being used for. It's called a korban. So if I shecht a sheep which was designated for Bedek Beis, what Bedek Beis? The upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. I shecht it outside Beis Hamikdash. Would you give me kos? At this stage, yes, because we just said korban, and korban means Bedek Beis. So the word says Kiddush Lemav comes to Hashem. Pesach or Moed. Anything which should be bought based on Shechayv, because anyway Pesach al Moed, anything which is not fit for Pesach Moed, you're not Chayv outside. Says the boy, if that's the case, okay. So if I designate a sheep for the Bedek Beis, you're not Chayv. But what about for the Oitzi Pas Chatus Mishtaleach Shuv the Pesach al Moed, the Pora Aduma and the Soya Mishtaleach? You can't say about them that they're not supposed to go to Beis Hamikdash. Why are they supposed to go to Beis Hamikdash? The Soila Azazel, was it supposed to come to Beis Hamikdash? Yes, of course. The whole lottery took place Pesach al-Moed. Since the lottery took place there, so if I shech the Soa Mishtalech will stop for Mincha as soon as it's ready for Mincha, we'll stop it. But we'll count again. So if you've got the Pesach al-Moed, so the Soila Azazel, anybody here ready to daven Mincha? Want to daven Mincha? There's nobody here who davened already. So as soon as you got to bang down, we'll stop that second. And you have to down the hard, there should be a minyan, because or we passed experience. Oh, very good. Let's get this clear. The Torah says if you take a korban, you shecht it outside Beis Hamikdash, what happens? Codes. So we also maybe Bedek Beis is what it's called korban. Says, well, no, why not? Because it says Pesach al-Moed Le'avir. It's not Pesach al-Moed. Now the Beis asks the question, what about two other korbanos? The Pora Aduma and the Soa Mishtaleach. What's special about them? Is that in some way they are fit to come to Pesach al-Moed. So therefore, you might have thought that if I check the Soila Azaz that outside the Beis Hamikdash, what should happen? I should be chayav kos because Pesach al-Moed. Rashi is very disturbed at the Pora Aduma. Why? Because Pesach al-Moed never comes into the Beis Hamikdash. In fact, Rashi deletes it. Rashi says you shouldn't. And it's interesting, it's got a whole long text to say that Rashi is right. You usually get a long text to say that Rashi is wrong. Here he says, yes, of course not. How can Pora Aduma be considered something Pesach al-Moed? And I'll say, Rashi in the 6th parasha, after you burn it, you put the ashes in 3 places. Okay, but it's not, the animals never bought Pesach al-Moed. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, so therefore, what about the Pesach Mishtaleach? Shuvoy lo Pesach al-Moed, Tamurim al Hashem. The Torah says afterwards, "Pesach al-Moed lo yavir." That's the words of the pasuk. If they mishkan Hashem, now give korban Hashem because a korban to Hashem. The Soa Mishtaleach is not designated to Hashem. Why not? Mish michodin Hashem yotzu eilu shen michodin Hashem. The Soa Mishtaleach is not designated to Hashem. Why not? Because you don't bring it as a mizbeach. In fact, what do you do with it? You throw it off the cliff. Since you throw it off the cliff, it's excluded from the word La Hashem. Says the Gemara. Ula Hashem. You waiting for Mincha? Oh. Ula Hashem lo hitzihu. Maybe you should take over. You should say La Hashem lo hitzihu. Should we stop now? Or should we stop now? Or should we'll count for 2 months because we're a bit behind. We'll count for 2 months. Think like this. The word La Hashem over here tells us that the soil azaz that you don't shecht it out. If you shecht it out, again, let's get that halacha very clear. Okay, no, we should stop. We stop fair for the people. Okay, we're up to the word of the Hashem. It's the middle of the topic. We're up to about 12 lines from not to be here. So we'll do this upload. Let's just see if I can go back to it. I tried to speak to a few times. Look. Does anybody know?